The detention cell aboard the human vessel Defiance was Spartan but clean, a stark contrast to the cramped torture chambers Zektar had expected. The Vorthak commander sat in the center of the room, his 6 eyes tracking every movement of his captors through the transparent aluminum barrier. 3 days had passed since his capture during the failed assault on the Terran mining colony of New Geneva. And still, these peculiar bipeds had not begun the interrogation he anticipated. Commander Alexander Chen entered the detention bay, his uniform bearing the insignia of the Terran Defense Coalition. Behind him followed Dr. Nora Vasquez, the ship's xenobiologist, her datapad clutched in one hand and a steaming cup of what the humans called coffee in the other. Zektar's mandibles clicked in anticipation. Finally, the torture would begin. "Good morning, Zektar," Alexander said, his tone conversational. "I hope you slept well." The alien warrior's head tilted in confusion. In 3 centuries of warfare across 17 star systems, no enemy had ever inquired about his rest. Zektar had commanded fleets that had glassed entire worlds, had personally overseen the subjugation of 6 species, yet this human spoke to him as if they were old acquaintances. "Your psychological warfare is crude," Zektar replied, his translator rendering his chittering speech into accented English. "When do you begin the pain extraction?" Nora looked up from her datapad, her brown eyes curious rather than cruel. "Pain extraction? We don't torture prisoners, Zektar. That's against the Geneva Convention." "Geneva? Convention?" The alien's multiple eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep confusion among his people. Alexander pulled up a chair and sat down, bringing himself to eye level with the towering alien. "It's an old human agreement about how we treat prisoners of war. Even enemies deserve basic dignity." Zektar's chittering grew agitated. "Lies. No species achieves galactic dominance through mercy. Your homeworld Earth was described in our intelligence reports as a death world, populated by apex predators. Where are your torture chambers? Your breeding pits for slave soldiers?" "We don't have those," Nora said simply, settling into another chair. "We have hospitals, schools, and libraries instead." "Impossible." Zektar's voice rose an octave. "You conquered the Rigelian Empire in 6 months. You broke the Centauri blockade with a single battle. Your species spreads across the galaxy like a plague of warriors." Alexander and Nora exchanged a glance. The human commander leaned back in his chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Zektar, may I ask you something? In all your battles against us, have you ever seen our main battle fleet?" The question caught the alien off guard. "Your main fleet? You have deployed over 3,000 vessels against the Vorthak hegemony." 3,000, Alexander repeated, his smile widening. "Nora, would you mind showing our guest the latest fleet deployment reports?" The xenobiologist tapped her datapad, and a holographic display materialized in the air between them. Zektar's eyes widened as columns of numbers scrolled past. Ship registrations, deployment orders, construction manifests, all bearing the unmistakable authentication codes of the Terran Defense Coalition. This cannot be accurate," Zektar whispered, his mandibles trembling. "This shows over 40,000 active vessels, 23 million crew members, production facilities in 47 star systems. That's just the military," Nora added conversationally. "It doesn't include our merchant marine, exploration fleets, or civilian defense forces." The alien commander's legs buckled, and he collapsed onto the cell's bench. 47 star systems. But our intelligence indicated you controlled only 12. "We control?" Alexander chuckled. "Zektar, we don't control anything. Those are human colonies, sure, but they're free worlds. Independent governments, local militias, civilian populations who happen to be human. We just help out when they ask for it." "Help out?" Zektar's voice had become a whisper. Nora leaned forward, her expression gentle. "Zektar, did you really think we were trying to conquer you? All those battles, all those ship-to-ship combats, we were defending ourselves. The Vorthak hegemony declared war on humanity, remember? We didn't even know your species existed until you started attacking our outer colonies." The full implications began to dawn on the alien warrior. His people, the mighty Vorthak hegemony, had controlled nearly a quarter of the galaxy for 2 millennia. They had crushed civilizations, enslaved species, and built their empire on the bones of conquered worlds. They were the predators, the apex species that had clawed its way to dominance through superior firepower and ruthless tactics. And they had attacked what they thought was a small, aggressive species with a handful of colonies and a modest fleet. If what you show me is true, Zektar managed, then the forces we have been fighting represent less than 5% of human military capability. Actually, closer to 3%, Alexander corrected. Most of our ships are still in the shipyards on Luna and Mars. We really didn't want this war, Zektar. We kept hoping you'd come to the negotiating table. Zektar looked up at the two humans, these impossible creatures who showed kindness to their enemies and built libraries instead of torture chambers. Your species conquered a death world, spreads across the galaxy, commands fleets that dwarf our greatest armadas. And you want peace? We want to explore, Nora said simply. We want to learn, to discover, to meet new species and exchange knowledge. War is just wasteful. Think of all the resources we could put towards scientific advancement instead of building weapons. Think of all the species we could meet as friends instead of enemies, Alexander added. The alien commander sat in stunned silence for several minutes, processing everything he had learned. His people had spent the last 8 years fighting what they believed was a desperate war against a dangerous but limited foe. In reality, they had been batting at the edges of a sleeping giant that had been showing remarkable restraint. Finally, Zektar looked up, meeting Alexander's eyes. If I were to contact the Hegemony Council, if I were to propose negotiations, would your species be willing to discuss terms? Alexander's smile broadened into a genuine grin. Zektar, we've been waiting for that call for 8 years. Dr. Nora Vasquez made a note in her datapad and looked up with her own warm smile. I'll prepare a cultural exchange proposal. I think you'll find humanity has a lot to offer the galaxy and a lot to learn from it. As Zektar watched these two humans discuss peace with the same enthusiasm other species reserved for war plans, he finally understood why humanity had achieved what his people never could despite their military might. It wasn't their technology or their numbers that made them formidable. It was their fundamental belief that former enemies could become future friends. For the first time in centuries, the Vorthak commander found himself smiling. The galactic war that had raged for 8 years ended, not with the thunder of plasma cannons, but with the quiet sound of laughter in a detention cell, as 3 beings from different worlds discovered they had more in common than they had ever imagined. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, the rest of humanity's fleet continued its patient vigil, waiting for the day when exploration ships could replace warships, and the galaxy could finally know peace.